Remember, when Trout, Judge, Harper, Acuna, or Ohtani come up, push the red button for light speed! Hey everyone, this is Will O'Toole welcoming you to another edition of Park Ridge Sports History. This week I want to tackle a couple of things. First of all, kind of late yesterday, the passing of Roman Gabriel. I'm just going to share some moments of the great quarterback from the late 60s with the LA Rams, guy who never got to the Super Bowl, was then later traded on to the Philadelphia Eagles. But for about 3 years then with the Rams, they had a sensational team. And the one particular year I want to go over is 1969, when Roman actually won the NFL MVP award. He had a great season for the Rams teams that never got over the hump. And then I want to continue with just a couple of odds and ends with the DH. And last week I spent a good amount of time on the opening day, or the very first DHs in the American League history. And of course, Ron Blomberg has the distinction of being the first one to come up to bat. But Tony Oliva that day in 1973 actually had the best day of any DH. And I told you that really, when I think about it, I did a number of decades, or actually 7 of a number of decades. So 1973 to 79, then 1993 to 1999, and then 2013 to 2013 to 2019. And what I was trying to get was just an idea of how the evolution of the DH has made baseball into a better game. And from statistically, what I kind of discovered over those, we've had the DH now since 1973, really 50 years of the DH. And now, of course, it's spread into the National League. And of course, we've had the DH in the World Series since 1976. For all you trivia guys out there, it was Dan Dreesen who was the first DH for a National League team in the World Series for the Cincinnati Big Red Machine. However, what I did notice, and I even brought this up, if you kind of look for a player with the DH stats of, let's say, 20 to 25 home runs, 75 to 85 RBIs, and hitting around 265 to 270, I had explained that those were the stats averaged out for the 27 World Series winners since we've from the American League, since we've had the DH in the American League. The first few years between the A's and the Yankees, and this is where I think how the game and the managers start to look at a position. I was telling a buddy of mine who's a huge Yankee fan, if you take a look at the baseball reference sites, you'll notice that the DHs for those 77 and 78 teams are really like 3 home runs, 16 RBIs. It wasn't seen as a full-time position as it is today. And it seemed like you were filling in players, giving them a day off, but you didn't want to miss their bat in the lineup, etc. Or you were doing what maybe some of the teams like the Red Sox had employed, getting old or veteran players who could no longer really play the field, like an Orlando Cepeda, and inserting them into the DH to really supply it with power and maybe RBIs. Of course, Earl Weaver, the guy I think I was looking at the most to see what he did. Well, actually, he had slow guys. He had Terry Crowley as his very first DH. Then he had Tommy Davis, who he employed for a few years. Then the Orioles went out and got Lee May. Of course, Davis and May, as I explained last week, 2 totally different kinds of hitters. Davis, more of a line drive, high average guy who could drive the ball and knock in runs at the tune of about 75 to 85 a year. Interestingly enough, Lee May accomplished the same thing, but with a little bit more power, a few more walks, but a lower batting average for those Orioles. And then I was surprised with this, and I was kind of happy I saw this. The 83 Orioles had Ken Singleton. Notice, now this was Joey Amalfitano, who took over for Weaver. they still used or employed as the DH, kind of like a slow-moving old player. But for Ken Singleton, he kind of differed from Davis and Lee May in that he drew a ton of walks. In fact, I think he drew like 80 walks that year in '83 to help the Orioles win the World Series over the Philadelphia Phillies in 5 games. So you can see, and the reason why I liked to use Weaver is that he really was there at the outset. He was there a good 10 years. And I just knew who his DHs were. I didn't realize Crowley was his first ever in Baltimore history. But and I was kind of using him as an example. Are they just getting top heavy, home run hitting guys? Now, you could actually argue Hal McRae, more in tune with Tommy Davis, singles, doubles, triples hitters, kind of came up in his prime. Kansas City finally found a solution for him. Not the best of fielders, and Whitey inserts him in as the DH, and of course he just really blossomed as a DH and manned that for a number of years, leading the Royals to divisional titles, and did get in the '80 World Series as their DH. But again, more to the type of player like Tommy Davis with a little, but however, I will tell you this, a little bit more speed. Then it evolved in this. Again, older players. Toronto was successful with both Dave Winfield and Paul Molitor. And I think Molitor really was, man, oh man, I was saying last week, what a season he had for Toronto, hitting .322, double digits in doubles and home runs, hit 80, I think had 80 RBIs. Let me just see here real quick as I go back, because I didn't realize how far into this I was going, but Molitor was just tremendous in 19 he was the DH for 94, and for Toronto he was the DH in 93 when they won, and in 92 he wasn't it was Rico, 93 he was the DH, and just right now I can't call him up, but he hit like .322, had 22 home runs, and he was about at that point about 34, 35 years old, but great hitter, more like Tommy Davis, what he was early in his career with the Dodgers, and of course an injury hurt tremendously, maybe a Hall of Fame career for Tommy Davis. All right. Actually, though, what I did want to point out, as I did go off on a little tangent, remember, I always say this. I treat this show as if we're, celebrating a big softball win, having a hamburger, a couple of beers, and talking all things sports. And as I say, my mind takes us, or our conversation takes us, in all different directions. What I really wanted to say was this. I have a guy by the name, and really, I didn't do all of the years, so please be mindful of that. There might have been a better player, but I've yet to see it. And that is Dmitri Young, who simply had, that I can see, the best day of any DH on opening day. And that occurred in 2005 for Detroit. Ready for this? Dmitri Young, and I haven't found it, and I almost can guarantee I probably won't find it. He hit 3 home runs on opening day in 2005. I don't even remember that. He went 4 for 4 at the plate. He scored 4 runs and drove in 5 RBIs as Detroit destroyed Kansas City. He hit the home runs off Ugueth Lima, and McDougal for Kansas City. But the funny thing is, the following year, he does also become the DH for Detroit on opening day. And instead of having a great day, he goes 0 for 4. He takes the horse collar. On that particular day in 2006, the guy who really, I believe, is probably the quintessential example of a DH, or what probably managers have in mind for a DH, is the great David Ortiz, Hall of Famer. On that day in 2006, Ortiz went 3 for 5. He had 2 runs scored, 3 RBIs, a double, and a home run in the Red Sox win in 2006. So there you go, a couple here and there that I wanted to show you. But Dmitri Young, from what I have seen, and I don't think I'm going to get another DH in the 1980s or the aughts, or even today, 2020s, the decades of 20s, that had a 4-for-4 three home run day, not 3-run home run, 3 home run day. All right, before I go into the Tommy John, I just wanted to. Howard and I were talking. I couldn't believe this. I kind of saw it late yesterday afternoon, last night, and it was the passing of Roman Gabriel, who was not only a football player for the Rams, he also played for the Philadelphia Eagles, came out of North Carolina State. But he was also an actor. I saw him in a John Wayne movie along with Rock Hudson. Oh, boy, I can't remember what the name of it is. But Rock Hudson plays a Confederate soldier who moves basically his entire community to the west, looking for new land, not just a new adventure, but a new settlement. John Wayne, of course, crosses paths with him. He's a cattleman and a horse trader, and they kind of ally themselves against Mexican forces, and I just can't remember the name. But Roman Gabriel actually plays what they termed a half-breed, half American, half Indian, who was John Wayne's in this movie, his adopted son. And of course, the movie has romance, and Roman Gabriel is involved in the romance of one of Rock Hudson's officer's daughters, one of these routines. And of course, it's a great Western picture. It's got John Wayne. It's got, like what Sherman Potter said in MASH, it's got 3 things that make movies great: horses, cowboys, and horses. And of course, he was talking at the time, if you ever see that MASH episode, the My Darling Clementine with Ward Bond, and of course, the great Henry Fonda playing Wyatt Earp, Ward Bond playing one of the other Earp brothers, and it was Tombstone. It was Shootout at the Old K Corral. It's a great black and white picture. It's just, it's got everything that a true Western should have. Dust, cowboys, setting out in the West. It's hot. And of course, a barroom brawl or a saloon brawl, as my brothers and I would call it. But it's just a great picture. It's really fictional history when I tell you that. Yeah, it's got some truth to it. We did have sheriffs and law officers by the names of Wyatt Earp, but truth be told, the movie doesn't really tell the full or even factual story of that shootout at the OK Corral. But it's a great Western, and that's what Roman Gabriel is in. It's a good Western. It's in color, not black and white. Kind of would have been cool to see that movie in black and white. But Gabriel, of course, and not only that, Merlin Olsen, I just realized that. So you see, this is where I'm going with this. Merlin Olsen, one of the leaders of the Fearsome Foursome. And of course, that's how I remember that 69 team with Roman Gabriel. First of all, Gabriel in 69 was 217 for 399 on the season with 2,500 yards, 24 touchdown passes, 5 touchdown rushes, and 7 interceptions on the season. Not bad. It was a 14-game season. What I remember about that season, besides being introduced to defensive nicknames, the Purple People Eaters, the Doomsday Defense, and of course the Fearsome Foursome, was the fact that the Rams were 11-0. And I'll never forget this. They played on a Sunday afternoon in December. And I remember it being here because my brother was involved in something with school. And we all went, and we came home kind of late, about 5:30 from it. And the game was on Channel 2 because CBS used to have the NFL. And I just remember watching that the Rams were 11-0, playing at home at the LA Coliseum, and they lose to the Minnesota Vikings. So they went from 11-0 to 11-1. The interesting thing is about that season, Gabriel was having his MVP season. Let me just get a couple of pictures of Roman Gabriel. I don't like these uniforms. For whatever reason, I like the home whites. These, yeah, I guess they would look cool on other teams, but for me, they kind of look kind of trashy for the Rams. And I know they use these as a throwback. I don't know. I guess it's just nostalgia. I grew up with the Rams playing with home whites with the white horn on the helmet, and I always thought that was kind of cool with the blue. I would tell you this, like the Cowboys away uniform, which was the blue. I did like seeing when the Rams were on the road. Let's say they played at Cleveland, just like the Cowboys, and they would wear just a very basic blue and white jersey against that helmet. It looked really cool, and I wish I could have found a picture on that. But Roman Gabriel came out of North Carolina State. He comes up, and I'm just going to focus on his 69 season because he does win that. He actually completed 52% of his passes, threw for 29,000 yards, 201 touchdowns. These wouldn't even listen if you had that kind of numbers for a quarterback today, but it's a totally different game. It's pass happy today. You would say just mediocre numbers. But at the time, you got to remember, we all thought it was great. It was enough to give Roman an MVP. That 69 Rams team, they got off to a 11-0 start, and then the season crashed on them. They actually beat Baltimore, beat the Falcons, the Saints, the Niners, the Packers, the Bears. They beat them 9-7 in October. Then whipped the Falcons, the Niners again, the Eagles. They beat the Cowboys 24-23. And, of course, the Cowboys were a playoff team that year. Beat the Vikings. And then on Sunday, December 7th, they lose to the Vikings in L.A. Now, had they beaten them, they would more than likely have hosted the playoff game. And then they lost to Detroit 28-0. Then they lost to Baltimore 13-7. So they go up to Minnesota 11-3, losers of their last three. And they play Minnesota tough. In fact, if you ever take a look at that playoff game, they are winning late. There's a couple of big plays by the Vikings, including a safety I think they register against Roman Gabriel. And it was played in the mud and the snow and the cold and all the rest of it. And then I believe Alan Page intercepts a pass. And either he goes in for the touchdown or laterals it back to Carl Eller. But it was a big play because the Vikings were kind of losing that game the whole time. In fact, let me just say something. That box score, ready for this, that was played Saturday, December 27th. And the Vikings, it was tied after one. The Rams are actually winning 17-7. Vikings cut it to 17-14 going into the final period. And then, of course, they outlast them. What happens is this. Pardon me, I take that back. I'm pretty sure Page gets an interception in the game. But there is, late in the game, Joe Cap scores on a 2-yard rush. And it actually puts the Vikings up 21-20. And then big time play late is that Gabriel is tackled in the end zone for a safety by Carl Eller. But for some reason, I kind of remember that there was an interception by Alan Page in the game. Let me just see something here. Page has an interception, runs it back 29 yards, and I didn't really investigate the game prior to this. I'm just shooting off the top of my head about this. But he intercepts a big pass, and I think that's when that's what leads to the Joe Cap 2-yard touchdown score to put the Vikings ahead to stay 21-20, and then, of course, they get the safety. But there's Roman Gabriel. He passed away age 82. And just to put this was one of the people – this was actually, when you talk about fearsome foursome, there was a number of players that the Rams inserted to continue the fearsome foursome. But the two mainstays were, of course, Deacon Jones, who actually went to Mississippi Valley State. Of course, all you Niner fans better know that college. I don't even think it any exists any longer. But that was the school that Jerry Rice, drafted by the Niners, came out of or graduated from, and of course his quarterback was a great passer in college, Willie Totten. They actually made names for themselves in college for Mississippi Valley State, the Delta Devils. But this was one of the fearsome foursome. And I didn't realize this until I was looking it up. Didn't know that Detroit actually had the first, I believe, a Detroit announcer attached that nickname to the Detroit Lions of the Alex Karras era to their team. And then, of course, the LA Rams had it attached to them. But the two mainstays were Merlin Olsen from Utah State, and of course Little House on the Prairie, who was also in that same movie with Roman Gabriel. That was the whole point as I circle around here. And of course, Deacon Jones, David Deacon Jones. The other two on this page were Lamar Lundy and Roger Brown. Now, I kind of remember Roger Brown being, I think, with the Lions. I could be wrong on that. But I think the original fearsome foursome included Rosie Greer, who for some reason I remember in an exhibition game. Oh, pardon me, they call it preseason, the NFL. So I'm being blasphemous by calling it an exhibition game. But Rosie Greer goes down with an ankle injury. And I think he's out for a number of games. But he was one of the other guys who was part of the fearsome foursome with Deacon Jones and Merlin Olsen, Lamar Lundy. And then I didn't realize this. Tyrone Talbert also was part of that. And one other guy by the name of Coy Bacon, I believe, also was part of it. But when you're talking about the fearsome foursome, you always start with Merlin Olsen and Deacon Jones. And, of course, it's a shame that here's the problem. Not that I was ever an LA Rams fan. I wasn't. But I guess the Rams just so embodied that Rams team like the 1960s football, because I remember a buddy of mine telling me about the 67 season. The Rams make the playoffs against Green Bay. And I don't want to go into that because I'm not even aware of the circumstances of the story. But I think they were both tied for some reason. And basically they met on the last day of the season. And the Rams, of course, win. I think they beat the Colts to go in and play the Packers in the first round. And, of course, they lose to the Packers. But there was a lot of either controversy or craziness about that because I think both teams finished 11-1-2. But I believe, or 11-2-1. But because the Rams had beaten the Colts and then tied them, of course, they won the Western Division. And, of course, in 69, I think maybe this is why it stands out for me so much, is that it's a great trivia question. In 1969, the NFL had 4 divisions, all begin with the letter C. And I've talked about this before. It was, of course, the Central with the Minnesota, Detroit, Chicago, and Green Bay, which hasn't changed. You had the Coastal, which was kind of strange. You had Baltimore and Atlanta, LA and San Francisco, literally coastals. And you had the Century and the Capital. And in the Century and the Capital, New Orleans and the Giants kind of switched. But basically it was Dallas in the Capital. Dallas in the Capital. Let me just check because this is fun. I think it was, but it was Cleveland in the Century, I think, along with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And let me just get it because I have the 1969 season here. The Coastal Division, I want to get this right. In the capital, he had Dallas, Washington. That's why, because Dallas is not the capital of Texas, but they named it the capital. You had Washington, you had New Orleans, and you had Philadelphia. All right. 3 of those were, 2 of them were former, I guess, capitals of the United States, with the Redskins still being the D.C., being the capital. And then in the Century, you had Cleveland, New York, St. Louis, and the Steelers. It was kind of cool, but I just loved all the fact that they had all 4. But here were many of the members: Tyrone Talbert, Rosie Greer. And the other thing with Rosie Greer, I just remember this as a kid. There were 2 things that really jumped out at me with Rosie Greer. One was that I think he crocheted as a way of relaxing on airplanes when he was going and coming to games NFL. And nobody ever made fun of him because he's 6'5", 285. And the other thing I remember is that he was somehow in, I think he takes down Sirhan when Sirhan assassinated Robert F. Kennedy in 1968. I just remember as a kid that Rosie Greer was in attendance. I think he might have been working or just supporting Robert Kennedy for the Democratic nomination for President of the United States. And that was in June. It was after the California primary, which Robert F. Kennedy had won. And then Rosie Greer, I think, wrested the gun from Sirhan. I'm not sure, but I know he was involved some way with that, with grabbing the assassin in one of our tragic and dark moments in the history of the United States. Okay, Roman Gabriel, 1969 MVP, passes away this weekend at age 83. One other thing. Roman Gabriel had 3 great seasons in a row for the Rams. Ready for this? This is my last thing I want to say. The Rams in 1967, 68, and 69, man, they were incredible. Had some, and this is what my whole point. 67, that's what it was. They were 11-1-2. They tied Baltimore, I think, on opening day, and then they beat them for the crown, for the division. And that was when it was in the Western Division. Then LA finishes 10-3-1, and then in 69, 11-3, and 1970, 9-4-1. Let me just check. I hope I got that right. I'm pretty sure, and I apologize if I don't, but I'm pretty sure they beat Baltimore and then lose to Green Bay. Yeah, I was right. So they tied Baltimore on the 4th week of the season, or the 5th week of the season. And then they have to beat Baltimore to get into the playoffs and, of course, lose in Green Bay. Roman Gabriel. All right, now, talked about my baseball. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about this. And this is the shame of baseball, and this is why I did the cartoon this week. And we've had a rash of injuries over the last few years, pitch counts, people blaming it on pitch counts, people blaming it on the clock in baseball that's been instituted, and a lot of players going down or going under the knife for Tommy John surgery. So I'd like to spend some time and talk about the career of Tommy John. And I'm going to tell you this. I do believe that Tommy John should be in the Hall of Fame for a number of reasons. One, of course, is simply because when you have a procedure, a medical procedure that has been nicknamed Tommy John surgery, you know you've had an impact on the game. Because I believe it was Dr. Frank Jobe who did the operation on Tommy John. First of all, let's take a look at Tommy John. And I just wanted to shout out to Spencer Strider, who I spoke about last year, and a new Bob Miller for the LA Dodgers, not the Bob Miller who played for the Mets and the Dodgers way back in the 60s and maybe even in the center in the 70s. Now, I know Bob Miller or the Dodgers, he is on the DL, 15-day, 2-week DL. But Spencer Strider, who I touted for the Cy Young last year, and I said, even though he had a 3.86 ERA, he had one or two really bad outings in a row where he gave up like 15 runs over 5 innings, but somehow the Braves managed to win one of those games. And I had said, if you took those 2 out, and then I deleted 2 of his better starts, I think he had a shutout last year, his ERA was like a more understandable 3.34. Got 20 wins, 5 losses. Yes, the Braves did win the division. They won a ton of games and all the rest of it, but he's one of the reasons why. And I know that many times they like to give the Cy Young to a guy maybe if there's some question like a Randy Jones. We were talking about that. Played for an under 500 team, 76 with the Padres, and of course he beats Jerry Koosman, who we spent a good deal of time talking about that a couple of weeks back. But sometimes the writers will go to the guy who's playing for an awful team. 72, you had Perry and Gaylord Perry and Steve Carlton playing for really terrible, mediocre team. Not even mediocre in case of the Phillies. They just out and out stunk that year. But there was a building block there for the 1980 Phillies, because you have Carlton on that team. You're going to have eventually in a couple of years Lazinski and Schmidt coming into their own. Anyway, Strider is out for the year, and he's going to be undergoing Tommy John surgery. So I just figure I would bring up Tommy John. Played 26 years. Yes. Age 44, maybe he couldn't do it anymore. But regardless, 288 wins, 231 losses. I actually did a study on him already, but I reinvestigated today. He actually had more wins after Tommy John than he did before. Now, number of reasons why. I love this picture, by the way. You can tell I used to love the numbers on the side. Detroit did the same thing. And, of course, here he is with the Dodgers. I tried to get the Dodger card with him in motion, because one thing about Tommy John, when you watch his motion in the old, I can't believe he ever hurt his arm, because he has such a fluid, easygoing style. It doesn't even look like he's throwing the ball hard. And yet, ready for this? I love this card as I go off on another tangent. Kellogg's, didn't even realize. I just put it in for the heck of it. Did he have a Kellogg's baseball card? Remember, they were in the cereal and stuff. And lo and behold, he does. This is from 1970. And I do like those White Sox uniforms. For some reason, I love the white. And then I love the white in the white. And then with the blue highlight. But you can see how the striping of that, the outline, it's very effective to me. I like the blue and the white with the White Sox. I did like the Dick Allen red, but I do like that look that they give. Anyway, ready for this? Here he is. Overall, he was 12 victories shy of 300, and basically that's why he hung out. But still, from the age of 40 to when he retired, ready for this? He won 18, 22, 24, 26, 31, 44, 53. He won 55 games after the age of 40. Now you say, all right, well, how many losses did he incur? All right, 26, 36, 40, 46, 55, 70 losses. He had 70 losses, 11, 15, 20, 33, 42, 54. All right, so he's 54 and 70. He actually went 11 and 23. Oh, wait a minute. Pardon me. It's actually, no, pardon me. I take that back. See what I mean? This is crazy. He goes he's 4 and 10 in 1985. He got traded in the season. So he spent time with both California and Oakland. I knew there was something wrong with that. Then he was 5 and 3 with the Yanks, 13 and 6 at age 44 with the Yankees in 1987, then 9 and 8 and 2 and 7. So let me just do this. He was 4, 9, 22, 22 and 9 is 31, 33 and 15, 33 and 19, 33 and 22, 33 and 32. He was 33 and 32 from the age 40 to 44. So he's still winning more games than he's losing. All right, let me get down. Prior to, and this is, didn't even realize this. I did forget this. Maybe I knew it, probably forgot it, but I'm just getting into the realization. He actually started off with Cleveland. And Cleveland trades him. Just amazing. Like the Mets with Matlack and Koosman in those early 70s, you had McDowell maybe coming into his own, maybe still a little bit immature, erratic, and all the rest of it in the early 60s, and Tommy John. Now, Tommy John didn't do too well with Cleveland, does get traded to the White Sox, where he wins 82 games and goes 82-80 with a 2.95 ERA. With Cleveland, yeah, he's 2-11, 3.61. But here's the deal. He struck out 74 guys and only gave up 41 walks. So you know he probably has some control. And in fact, it's just a matter of him harnessing his talent. In overall, ready for this? Before the surgery, Tommy John was 124 and 106. After the surgery, 164 and 125. Now you can say, well, after the surgery, he's playing for the Dodgers, goes to the Yankees, and all the rest of it. The teams that he played on after the surgery were 189 games over 500, which comes to about 87 and 75, 88 and 74. Let's go with the better record, 88 and 74. With those teams, John averages a record of 13 and 9, but it was like 9.4, so I just made it 13 and 10. Prior to Tommy John's surgery, Tommy John, the teams were 62 games over 500, with really one bad team, the 1970 White Sox, which were 40 games under. They were terrible, 56 and 106. And actually, John, I think, was on that 70 team. He was actually 12 and 17 with, ready for this, a 3.27 ERA. So he didn't have really a bad year. Nevertheless, those teams, John is still on teams that are 62 games over 500. Because remember, he gets traded to the Dodgers, 72, 73, 74, has some good seasons there. Those teams actually work out to be 84 and 78. Tommy John has a 539 winning percentage on teams that have a 519 winning percentage. So he's 20 points above his whole team. Really, sign of an excellent pitcher. He's better than the winning percentage of the team. Now, where does it go? The teams that John played on after Tommy John's surgery, they won at a clip of 543. Excellent numbers. Get this. Tommy John, 23 points ahead of his team, 567. It's amazing how consistent he was pre and post surgery. And actually, I believe this, that he probably has a better statistics when you think about it after, because obviously he's past the Bill James age of 27. He's able to pitch another 16 years or 15 years in the league as opposed to the first 11, misses an entire season, comes back and rallies his troops. Ready for this? Pre-Tommy John, in the number of innings he pitched, 2,165 innings, and I did this by outs as well, which is a total of 6,497 outs. He only gave up 1,273 walks in his career, 633 over those first 11 years. Actually, for every out, I think it's the equivalent of 9% of his walks for every out. Okay? So for every 3 outs, 9%. Okay? Number of strikeouts, he averaged 19.5% of his strikeouts. He had actually 1,273 strikeouts pre-Tommy John out of those 2,165 innings. Well, those 1,273 outs, if you divide those by 3, you get 424.1 innings. So basically, almost 20% of the time, 19.5% of the time, he was getting a strikeout out of those per inning. Ready for this? Post Tommy John, he threw 300 more innings, 2,441 innings. He actually allowed 10 fewer walks over 300 innings to the tune of 8%. Strikeouts were down. It was only at 13%. He had 972 strikeouts. And this is what's gotten, his ERA, okay. He had 28 shutouts prior, 18 after. Yes, his ERA was 2.97 as opposed to post Tommy John 3.81. Now, we could use the excuse of the DH. We could use the excuse he was getting older. Nevertheless, it is a point higher. I get all that. But I'm starting to think this. Maybe here's what Tommy John learned. And maybe this is what could cure the problems with so many injuries by the pitchers. Maybe instead of going out and just throwing as hard as they can for let's say the limited number of pitchers that they're going to be allowed in a game, maybe what they should be doing, since we have better fielders today, we have better analytics telling us where the players hit the ball. I think this is kind of what John was doing too. And I could be wrong. It's just a theory. It's just something I get out there because there's no definitive reason for all this, all the rash of injuries. Nevertheless, I'm thinking to myself, now you always say, let them hit the ball and get that first pitch over for a strike. Maybe, and I could be wrong. I'm not a major league pitcher. I haven't had to undergo the knife for surgery. I haven't had my arm swell up on me because I've thrown 80 pitches in a game or 150 pitches in an outing and all the rest of it. But I'm also thinking this. If you got all these great defensive players behind you, and the whole idea is to throw strikes, maybe peel down a little bit and allow your fielders to be part of the action. And maybe what John realized, yes, he cut down on the percentage of outs to strikeouts from 19.5 to post 13%. I've already said he's older, etc. But maybe what John learned was, hey, let them hit the ball. Yes, higher ERA, but there was the DH. Maybe that is an extra half run over his career. Maybe instead of 3.81, maybe it's now 3.51. You don't know what the DH would have done on the other side of Tommy John surgery, pre-Tommy John surgery, 1973. But maybe the players, maybe the pitchers should have some confidence or just allow the ball to be hit and let your fielder. I know that sounds, but maybe it's saving the arms of some of these great pitchers. Maybe some of the great pitchers realize, maybe if I allow my players, my guys behind me, who I believe in, to become more part of the action, part of the play, I'll save a little bit of my arm. I'll have a little bit more gas to go on, and I won't be injured as much. I don't know. And I might be talking through, and I'm probably talking through my hat, but it is interesting. He cut down on the strikes, lasted until the age of 44, had just as many wins, if not more wins, came within a dozen games of 300 for a career. And he is the guy that revolutionized basically pitching surgery, which would have been a death knell for many pitchers had Tommy John not been the pioneer of Tommy John surgery. Just interesting. Just something to think about. And just having fun playing with the numbers and all the rest of it. And having an opportunity to review the career of Tommy John. Hey, this is Will O'Toole thanking you for joining us for another Park Ridge Sports History episode. See you next week. Bye now.